Cadillac Records explores the story of the Chess record label. It stars Adrien Brody as Lenny Chess. It's got a really great cast. Jeffrey Wright does his own singing as the great Muddy Waters. Beyoncé Knowles is there. She does her own singing as well as Etta James, as well as some other greats show up as well. Columbus Short as Little Richard. A whole slew cast there. Anyway, I don't want to take away time from my interview because it did go a little over this week, but I had the great honor that Academy Award-winning actor Adrien Brody joined me in the studio, as well as the writer and director of the film, Darnell Martin. They were in here the other day and took the time to sit down with me and have a little discussion, and it sounded something like this. I'm joined here in the studio by writer and director Darnell Martin, as well as Academy Award-winning actor Adrien Brody. We're here to talk about Cadillac Records. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for
Pleasure.
having us.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so Darnell, if I can just start off with you, just so our audience has a little bit of background here, just tell me, a pretty short synopsis of the film.
It's basically how the blues became rock and roll and R&B and rap. It's the basis of all popular music. And it's the story of these guys in Chicago and how the Chicago blues was created, how it came out of Mississippi, and how these guys got together and made this thing in their relationships, and how they soared, came up, came down, broke apart, fell in love, had their hearts broken. There's sex, violence, and rock and roll.
Okay.
It's a romantic comedy. set in the 50s.
Well, speaking of genre, actually, that leads me to a question I had later on. Would you guys define this as a biopic, as a musical? If you had to pigeonhole this, it's kind of tough to slot,
really.
isn't it?
Yeah, not a biopic. I think it's a cross between Goodfellas and Lady Sings the Blues. Because Lady Sings the Blues, it's not a biopic, really. It feels like a film. And I love that, Diana Ross interpreted Billie Holiday. She didn't do an imitation of her. And Goodfellas, in the sense of, these guys get together and are vying for the American dream. And in a weird way, they're almost coming from the same place. Muddy, the bluesman from Mississippi, and
Leonard,
extreme poverty.
impoverished Jewish immigrant coming from Poland, and both of them were outsiders, and they were fortunate enough to find each other, and I think there's also a genuine love story there. Darnell has mentioned this often, that there is a deep bond between Muddy and Leonard Chess. At the same time, Leonard was a businessman, and that was his talent, and Muddy obviously was a tremendous musician. But they united, and it's a pretty powerful connection.
It's amazing the relationships between Adrien and Jeffrey, and Adrien and Beyoncé. They did incredible work. One of the things that I thought was so interesting about Adrien's character is that he's straddling these two worlds. And, when we talk about casting, because I also wrote this, I had a very definite idea of who these guys could be, and I actually wrote this with Adrien in mind, particularly because I wrote it for Beyoncé, and I wrote it with Adrien in mind. So with thinking of Beyoncé and thinking of this guy who straddles both cultures, to kind of keep it real, and I felt like there's very few guys who can play that, who can be in the black culture and have that be their world, and say, wait, you know what? I could see that. I could see Beyoncé kissing Adrien. I could see, before Adrien there was Matt. I could see Beyoncé kissing Matt. So there's only like a couple of guys who could have been this guy. And it was very interesting because I originally had Adrien in mind for it, and I think we got our wires crossed somehow, and he didn't really get the script right away. And Matt came on, and then Matt did another project and asked us to wait, and we couldn't wait, and we went back to Adrien again, and he jumped on to do it, which was fabulous. And they have incredible chemistry together. And I can't remember what day we shot that scene, but what we call the in quotes love scene. When we shot that scene, I knew I had a movie. So within 6 days, I knew I had a movie because there was such truth and there was such honesty and such a connection there that whatever happened, we had that, and I was really super excited.
Oh, thanks.
Let's talk a little bit about the truth, if you will, of this movie. This is a fictional account of factual events, right? And there was an interesting article in the Chicago Sun-Times, which kind of went into where the history became a film. What types of artistic licenses did you take with this story?
For instance, because we're sitting here with Adrien, let's talk a little bit about Leonard's character. Leonard's character was a very hard nut for me to crack, because all of the research was that he was a hard, strong businessman. There was exploitation. There was, the love of the music, but, he didn't cheat on his wife. He didn't drink. He was just very, very straight, and it was just about the business. I didn't get him. He was the guy who was the outsider to me. Until I started going at him through Etta. And the information I found about him through Etta was really interesting. One is, yes, he was a family man, but, he wasn't so faithful. Two is, I found later on in his life he did drink. And three, which was really interesting to me, is there was a very intimate connection between him and Etta. The true things is when Etta sang "I'd Rather Go Blind," he had to leave the room because he started crying. This is a really hard guy. The other thing is she said that he was the only man who saw her vulnerability. He saw past that whole bravado, that tough image that she had, and he saw how hurt she was. He helped get her into rehab. When they were coming after her house, he said, "Put it in my name." Everybody thought she was crazy because he had a history of not being right with his artists. And she did that. And when he died, he didn't leave a will, but he took care of her and made sure that deed to the house came back. What I brought to that wasn't necessarily the truth, but who knows? I wasn't there. I find it very interesting that she says that he was the one man who knew she was vulnerable. Was the kiss. That's where we took license. But when I read that stuff about him, suddenly I said, you know what? I like this guy. I like this part of him. This is somebody I can write now. And so going from that and feeling like the loneliness of this guy who has one foot in the black world and one foot in the white world and isn't comfortable in the white world, and yet ironically is going after this white American dream. And in the end, the dream, the thing that he wants most of all, is this black woman, is this life, and it literally breaks his heart to walk away from it when the music is over, when being with this culture is over. He drives away and dies. I was like, wow, that's poetry. That I can write. That I can get behind. And Adrien just pulled that off. You really felt it wasn't black and white. It's gray. You know, I know a lot of people are saying, oh, you know, but he did all these bad things, and why is it? And I'm like, you know what? It is in there. How come he doesn't get called on it? Well, because actually nobody ever called him on it when he was alive. He was too powerful. You know, what they were coming from was that plantation mentality. I actually do call him on it on a scene with Howlin Wolf and Muddy at the end. That never existed. That never happened. So he is called on it, you know. But what the character is someone who's torn and struggling with it. If he's not struggling with it and just like, ha, 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 I am exploiting you. You know what I mean? What is that? That's a cartoon. I don't think people are like that. They're not black and white. They're gray, and we're always struggling with the evil that we do and the good that we do and wanting to be better and wanting to fit in. And the tragedy, does he get his comeuppance? Yeah. The thing that he was searching for was never really what he wanted, because he got it, and he still died heartbroken.
Adrien, if I can direct a question at you, you're very well known to be a method actor, someone who really gets into the characters. A lot of the other actors in this film, for instance, Beyoncé's playing Etta James, Mos Def is playing Chuck Berry. These are people who are still alive, and even if they weren't still alive, there's various recordings of them. There's all sorts of archival images. There's someone to learn from. You playing Lenny Chess, how did you explore who this person was, someone who's passed away a while ago?
Well, there are advantages to there not being a plethora of visible material on him. There are accounts of him in biographies. Darnell supplied me with a number of books. A Nadine Cahota's book called Spinning Blues into Gold was particularly helpful, forming a factual understanding of his past. I think it's important to know his roots and what his struggles were to get a sense of what he was striving for and overcoming. And I do have some creative license within that because, as Darnell said, she was not looking for an imitation of a person. I feel my goal, regardless if the character is fictional or not, is to give an honest portrayal of a human being and the complexities of that human being. And I do feel there's a greater responsibility in portraying a real-life person. I didn't want to vilify him, nor did I want to candy coat him. I want, he was a very complex man, and I do know a number of executive types, both in the film industry and the recording industry, and he is somewhat of an amalgam of people I've met in my years of kicking around as an aspiring musician and aspiring actor. So it's something I felt that I understood the territory I was in. It is not something. It's not an area that it's not something I sit with regularly, but it is something that I understand.
I don't know if I can turn it back to you. Chess Records had so many hugely influential, legendary musicians, so many Hall of Famers and greats, and of course you can't include them all in one film. One person though who I was particularly sad not to see in the film is
Bo Diddley,
a guest who was previously on my show. Bo Diddley, yes.
Yeah.
And especially considering that I'm a Man is featured so prominently in the film. You've heard this before, I guess, about Bo Diddley.
No, I knew it when I wasn't putting him in. The reason being, I mean, it was huge. When I first wrote this, it was enormous. There was Sonny Boy Williamson, both of them. There was Bo Diddley. I mean, everyone was in it, and it had to shrink down. And the essence of it, I had to capture the essence of the story. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons that I took Bo Diddley out was because when Bo comes in, Muddy's thrown off. When Chuck comes in, Muddy's thrown off. Dramatically, it feels like a double beat. It would have been hard for the narrative. Yet I had too many characters, period. But it would have short-shrifted Chuck. Because it is, you go from Muddy to Bo to Chuck. Because you could argue that Bo was, well, you actually could argue that Ike Turner, had the first rock and roll hit. But, I mean, you could say that Bo was it. And it was a choice between Bo or Chuck in this bizarre way. And it's interesting because the other movie chooses Bo. And I think they probably felt the same way about it because that excitement of the rock and roll coming in, it's with Bo and Chuck. And they almost become that same being. Even though Bo is so different musically from Chuck, it still is like, whoa, we're getting into something different here. And Muddy's being left by the wayside. And there's an interesting thing, when Bo came in, actually Muddy wanted that song. He wasn't trying to help Bo, come in and record his song. He was like, yes, give me that song. I'm going to sing it now. So it was pretty much a big shock. And if you bring Bo into it, you have to bring Phil Chess into the story. Because Bo Diddley was a product of Phil Chess. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, that's where Bo got put at the wayside. There were a lot of people who I adore and a lot of stories. I'm so sorry I can't talk more about Howlin Wolf.
So is this essentially, though, Lenny's story? Whose story really is being told here? Is it the record label's story?
It's the story of how the blues became popular music.
Uh-huh.
It's an ensemble piece.
Mm-hmm.
It's a story about the music. I'm hanging it on the structure of it, the hanger of it, let's say, would be kind of a Goodfellas scenario, except not using the main character as a voiceover. Structurally, you would probably say that it's Muddy's story because he's in it from beginning to end. And he's what the narrative is hung on. Thematically, it's the story of how the blues became popular music. And it is an ensemble. And if it's not that, it doesn't work.
You mentioned Phil, Lenny's brother, was kind of left at the wayside, but was a co-founder of Chess Records. Did you try to write that character into Lenny's character,
No.
or was it just kind of?
Well, in a sense, yes, because one of the things that Phil did is Phil dealt a lot with Etta as well. He was, and he was also the softer of the brothers. Phil was the guy that the bluesmen liked more. He was the guy who hung out more. So yes, in that sense, yes, I did. They became one. The reason that Phil is not in the script is also because I wanted to concentrate on the relationship between Muddy and Leonard. If Phil's in the film, then it becomes a relationship between the two brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a love story between Muddy and Leonard.
Mm-hmm. Adrien, if I can put it back to you, you're very well known for being very selective about the scripts that you choose to act in and the projects you get involved in. What was it about Cadillac Records that really, attracted you?
Well, it's aside from the character being a challenge, I do love not only the music and the purity of the blues. It comes from a really honest place, and one that stems from from pain, pain and oppression, and symbolically, I feel that it transcends all of that, and that voice, that quality that makes it universally loved, is that it is so honest. And these are, great, incredibly talented people that have affected so much of music in 20th century, and it's a look at their flaws and their complexities and their relationships between one another. And I haven't seen anything like that. It hasn't been done. Darnell wrote a great script. The relationship with Chess in that world was intriguing to me. It's something that I can understand. I grew up immersed in the hip-hop world, and there is a sense of having to prove that you are, real enough and street enough, and that is a part of, my culture as a New Yorker growing up in Queens and in the city. So it's something I can easily translate into this character. So it was just it was good stuff.
Let's talk about that for a second. You did grow up in Queens, very involved in hip-hop culture. Of course, Queens, the birthplace of hip-hop. Little known fact is you worked with Tupac Shakur and Bullet.
That's right.
And now you're in this film working with Beyoncé, Mos Def, Q-Tip. Was there something about working with all these great musical artists as well that attracted you?
Sure. I knew Beyoncé was involved, but there's something working with Jeffrey Wright as well. I mean, I like to work with creative people who I admire, and the fact that I like their music is an additional asset, but I think any form of expression, whether it's music or art or whatever, as long as people are bringing truth. And I think what's so wonderful about film is that it is a real collaborative process, and especially on a film like this, which we had a very limited budget, which creates time limitations. You really have to be in there with everyone, and firing, at high levels at all times, and there is a wonderful, although stressful, creative energy that takes place, and the feeling was pretty fantastic. I mean, it did feel like a recording studio. The actors who had to play were constantly improvising on their guitar, and Columbus was on his harmonica to a point which was annoying, but it was I get it, and I would have done the same. But it created this wonderful, real atmosphere, and there was humor on the set, and
beautiful music.
And beautiful music. And
I mean, the crew loved hearing it.
So I knew that I knew, and I had hoped that that's what I would be getting into by being a part of it.
Okay. Darnell, if I can flip it back to you. Of course, Cedric the Entertainer plays Willie Dixon, who takes us through the narrative. Mm-hmm. Why did you make the creative choice to have him voicing over, leading us through the story rather than, choosing another path for that?
It could never be Muddy or Leonard's voiceover because they, to me, were very traditional men in the sense of holding in how they really felt, to the point of when Muddy sang, it was an explosion of feeling. But I don't feel like if Muddy had a voiceover, I can't imagine he'd say anything. It would just be, because, men have this kind of, I'm not really sure. And I feel the same way about Leonard. And the beauty is...
Be a lot of expletives if
exactly.
Leonard had the voiceover.
Yeah, and nothing of the truth in a way, because they're continually...
it would have been too much of, this is my perspective, and you can't watch them objectively either.
Yeah, and they wouldn't have been honest about it. They couldn't be honest about it. His honesty, the power of his scene with Beyoncé is she strips him down. And it's just like, whoa, it's been all this bravado shit, I'm the man. Everybody's carrying guns, it's Al Capone, Chicago, and it's like, it's all this, and she strips him down, and it's so beautiful and sweet, and you've never seen him that way. And it's the same thing with Muddy when he sings, so if they had the voiceover, it would make the other scenes feel, you already got it. He already, you can't see my hand gestures. He already put it out there, you know. And so Willie was the writer. Willie was the songwriter. So Willie, to me, felt comfortable with his feelings. He felt like one of those sensitive men, He felt like someone who could say, well, this is how this was, and this is how that was, and this is how I feel, and not be trying to cover anything up with this kind of, typical maleness, of that time. So I guess that's why I chose him.
Okay.
He was the songwriter.
Right. I guess it'll be the last question. I guess I'll aim it at the both of you. I'll kind of flip it a little around. First to you, Darnell. When in this film, Beyoncé sings, Jeffrey Wright sings, as you mentioned. A lot of the actors are fooling around with instruments and playing them. Was that always your original intention? Is to have the actors singing, and what does that bring to the film?
Absolutely. And my original intention was to have him playing the drums. The problem is we couldn't get the actual song "She Moves Me" that he played the drums on, which is a great song.
We shot it. We didn't shoot that. We didn't shoot that. We
didn't shoot that song.
Incorporated it into another.
What happened was we had to create a song for him to play the drums on that we shot that wasn't very good. So we were coming off of one amazing song, and then him playing the song that wasn't very good, and then saying, yeah, no, that's a song. It didn't really
that's
work.
A record.
That's a record. It didn't really work. It was kind of like, is this a joke? But if we could have had that song, She Moves Me, but, we have so many great songs that we paid so much money for to get. We just, at some point, had to say, okay, we don't have money for this song. And we tried to improvise by creating a song, and it was... We shouldn't have gone there. We should have just said,
you missed out on my drum skills, though.
Yeah, which are major.
Not.
So I guess we'll finish up with a similar question. As you mentioned, you were something of a struggling musician in your own time. Can you tell me a little bit about your own musical background and what it was like, working with these actors who are also musicians?
Well, I guess it's unfair for me to say I'm a struggling musician because I never really pursued it as a career choice. I've been busy with my day job, but and oftentimes I think that creating music was an outlet for me when I was an unemployed actor. and I love music because it does allow tremendous freedom with that creative inspiration and feelings but I'm not like I can't read music. I learned to play Chopin for the pianist. I had to learn that from memory. But I do have a very musical understanding. I sequence music, so I play essentially all instruments and sounds through a keyboard or a synth, and then layer them, drum kits, but I don't have any real formal musical training. And working with musicians, as I said earlier, it's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful thing to sit with people and watch them jam and be a part of something like that. And the key is to find magic. That's the same thing with making beats or sequencing music. I have thousands of beats that I've worked on, and every so often you find magic. But you have to keep kind of going into it, and one abstract sound will lead to a whole progression that you didn't have in your head, but it comes about, and it's a wonderful process. And I think music is a fantastic outlet for people, and whether I think there are a lot of talented musicians who don't attempt to even make a career out of it. They just play.
Sure. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have left. But before I let you guys go, I just want to conclude with a quote from Bo Diddley, which he said to me when he was on the program. And he said, "They say Elvis Presley started rock and roll. That's the biggest lie in the world. You need to explain to the people, all the young people, how this all came about." So, Darnell and Adrien, thank you for making Bo Diddley's dreams come true, and thanks for coming on the program.
It's amazing.
Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much to my guests, Academy Award-winning actor Adrien Brody, who plays Lenny Chess in Cadillac Records, as well as Darnell Martin, the writer and director of that film. The film also stars Jeffrey Wright as Muddy Waters, Columbus Short as Little Walter, Cedric the Entertainer as Willie Dixon, Mos Def as Chuck Berry, and Beyoncé Knowles as Etta James. It comes out tomorrow night in wide release. The film is Cadillac Records. Please stay tuned for The African Show, coming up next on 89.9 FM in New York WKCR.